Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if our person combines the roles of our chairman and the chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MiTV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
It's a Thursday evening. Thanks for joining us on Corporate Governance Platform. I am Tunde Odeyemi, your anchorman. And in today's episode, we shall be taking a look at the role of executive directors as managers of corporate business. And joining me and leading in the conversation this evening is Mr. Francis Olawale. Mr. Francis Olawale is a member of the Governing Council and the current Honorary Treasurer of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. He is an accountant by primary training, a governance and compliance practitioner, and also a chartered secretary. He is the principal partner of Frank's Nominees, a secretarial governance and business support firm, and the founding partner of Frank's Management Consulting International, a training financial advisory and process engineering firm. Mr. Olawale is an IFC certified board evaluator and ISO 9000-2015 certified accountant. Mr. Francis Olawale, you are welcome to the show.
Thank you, it's my pleasure. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, viewers.
And thank you for finding time to join us on this program.
Pleasure once again.
Okay, Mr. Olawale, let's hit the ground running. Who are the executive directors of corporate business?
Okay, executive directors of corporate business are operational leaders. They are operational directors. They are directors who have employee-employer relationship with the company. And basically what they do is to support the MD CEO in achievements of the strategic imperatives of the company as set and as mandated by the board.
Okay, now what distinguishes the executive directors from the non-executive director and vice versa in the same company?
Okay, like I said, earlier on, executive directors are operational leaders. The influence of that is the fact that they have daily deliverables. They resume 9 to 5, so to say.
Okay.
They are employees, of the organization. While the non-executive directors, are just directors who are part of governance process, who are part of decision making, and then they function, by coming around to the board only when the board sits, and then of course as required, as other duties assigned, to them, but they are not employees, of the company. And then the kind of engagements, documents given to them. The non-executive directors, are seen in section 2.4, of the NCCG code,
okay,
are issued letters of appointments, while the executive directors, are issued contracts of employment.
Okay.
And basically the type of relationship that exists, that's another, distinguishing factor. The kind of relationship that exists between the company and then each of them. For example, the non-executive directors, they have a contract for service with the company. In other words, that's a contract between a service provider and the client. While the executive directors have contract of service, that's like a contract, between, in quotes, master and servant. That's employer and employee.
Do they really perform the same function in the company?
Okay, well, some cases, most times at least, it's a given. The MD CEO, who himself, if you're supposed to classify him by the species of director that he is, is an executive director. The MD CEO is a given, is a member of the board. Many times, you know, the ED finance, the CFO, you know, usually, you know, for obvious reasons, always a part of the board. And then any other, you know, director has deemed fit, you know, by the board. But the idea is that because of the global practice requirements, you know, that requires non-executives to be much more than executives on board. You know, so most times companies don't want to have large numbers, you know, of executives, because you will have to outnumber them, you know, by the number of non-executives you bring in, you know, on board. Going back to your questions, the roles that they play, you know, is that they have daily deliverables, you know, functional roles. You have ED finance, you know, you have ED corporate services and all of that. You know, the functional areas, you know, of the business, most times these EDs are the operational leaders, you know, of these functional areas.
You mentioned the NCCG code, the National Code for Corporate Governance, right?
Yes.
So now the code provides that the executive directors should have broad understanding of the company's business. That is in addition to possessing such other qualifications as may be needed for their specific assignments or responsibilities. Now, why would you say this is really important?
Yeah, that's important because every organization, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, there are cardinal areas, you know, there are cardinal functional areas of an organization. I'm talking about, you know, finance, I'm talking about operations, I'm talking about, you know, HR, you know, I'm talking about personnel and marketing. You realize that, you know, for every organization, all other three areas apart from operations are service areas, you know, but operation is the core area of any entity. And as such, you need competent hands. You need a duty of skill and care, you know, to man it, because that is the soul of the business. You know, so you need people who have understanding, you know, of that business. Before the NCCG, it's usually advisable, you know, most codes, most sectional codes say, okay, the EDs, so the NEDs should be more than the EDs. You realize that NICOM, you know, the insurance industry particularly stated that they wanted a minimum of, you know, 40% of EDs on board. Why? Because of the peculiarity of their business. I could have acumen, you know, as a businessman, understand, you know, decision-making process, but I don't have the technical know-how of a particular business, you know, area. And that is the life wire, you know, to achieving the strategic imperatives that have been set by the board. You know, so that's the reason why, you know, the code requires that EDs, you know, should be competent. In other words, you know, what the code is saying is that there should be people, you know, of expertise. There should be people of competence, you know, because the nature of their duty majorly is that of skill and care.
Okay, still talking about the code. Why do you think the code allows now executive directors to take appointments as non-executive directors in other companies when it's not, of course, detrimental to their responsibility? Why do you think the code allows that?
Well, for obvious reasons. Of course, CAMA, of course, I'm sure you're aware, you know, that the Company and Allied Matters Act 2020, you know, has just been gazetted, you know, just last month. You know, CAMA did not differentiate in its definition of director. It simply defines, you know, a director as anyone who is so appointed by the company to manage, you know, and control the business of the company. So it does not really differentiate. But for governance, you know, purpose, you realize that, you know, the EDs that have executive role is a different ballgame, you know, from having executive and operational, you know, functions, and then functioning on the board. You know, so a board, you know, may want to expose an ED, you know, to governance. An ED who is a future leader, is a future board, you know, product of the company. They may want to expose him, you know, so that he sees, you know, what decision making, what governance is about, you know, generally. And then, of course, like I said, another reason, you know, may be, you know, the fact that it is in line with the succession plan arrangement of the company. You know, and then succession plan works in two ways. You know, you're trying to refresh, you know, basically the board, you know, either that, or you're trying to build new leaders, you know, to fill in identified positions. So if a particular person has been spotted to be a future, you know, board material, the board could want to expose him, you know, so that when the time comes, you know, for him, you know, to migrate into the board, he already has some exposures, you know, as far as governance is concerned.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
When the code says as long as it is not detrimental to their responsibilities, what really came to mind is, can an executive director become an executive director in the same industry?
Well, in the same industry, you know, to competitors. I mean, if you want to become an NED to your competitor, that definitely, you know, at that point in time, conflict of interest will arise. So I'm not going to say, you know, yes. But could an executive director be nurtured into becoming, you know, a future non-executive director in that particular company? Nothing kicks against that, you know, in the code. But what the code kicks against is that an executive, it is not, the code says that it is not desirable for an executive director in the same company or the MD CEO in the same company to become the chairman, you know, of the board. And then the board provides that in an unlikely situation, in an extreme situation, if it is unavoidable, you know, there should be a cooling off, you know, period for obvious reasons.
We are still discussing the role of executive directors as managers of corporate business. We quickly go on a short break. When we come back, we continue the discussion with Mr. Francis Olawale. Please don't go away.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in the corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MiTV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
You're welcome back. We are still discussing the role of executive directors as managers of corporate business, live in MiTV. And I still have Mr. Francis Olawale with me. Now, Mr. Olawale, what is the rationale behind the behind the provision of the code that an executive director should not be a member of the committees responsible for remuneration, audit, or nomination and governance?
Okay, because of the sensitive, you know, nature of the role those committees play. You know, by NCCG, there are 4 basic, you know, committees. In addition to those 3 that you mentioned, the risk, you know, the risk management, you know, committee. Okay, now if you check respectively, principle 11.12, 11.22, 11.43. You know, dealing with the composition of remuneration, nomination, and audit, you know, it specifically, you know, states that only NEDs should be members of those committees, and even goes further to say, you know, that there should be more INEDs. You know, INEDs are directors of a higher degree of objectivity, just to show you, you know, the level of objectivity required, you know, for those functions, and that's because of the sensitive role, you know, that they play. Now, let's paint a picture. The remuneration, you know, committee decides remuneration. You know, so why should, you know, an ED who is a full-time employer, in quotes, of the company, you know, be involved in setting his own remuneration? There will be high level, you know, of bias. Then for audit committee, for obvious, you know, reasons, even though the liability, you know, for the financial statement is on the board, we know that it's the operators you know, that basically prepares, even though the liabilities on the board. You know, so the executive directors, you know, play a prime role in preparing it. So they cannot also be supervising, you know, the audit committee basically interfaces, you know, with the external auditor, you know, they manage the relationship. So the executive directors cannot be in charge of that relationship, being key players in the preparation, you know, of those financial statements on behalf of the board. And then for nomination, you know, committee, one of the key roles, you know, of the nomination committee is, you know, annual evaluation of independent non-executive directors. And then the nomination committee as well is in charge, you know, of headhunting, you know, appointments, you know, on the board. And the non-executive directors, you know, on board basically are expected to bring independent judgment, and they're supposed to serve as checks and balances, you know, to the EDs. If the EDs are part of, you know, that committee, you realize that water would have mixed, you know, with oil, and there won't be objectivity, and as such, there won't be, you know, achievement of the strategic integrity, you know, expected, you know, of the executives to achieve on behalf of the board.
Okay, and also the reason for that. Now, but why is the code specific that executive directors declare conflict of interest on appointments and annually also declare conflict of interest where they see potential areas of conflict of interest?
Yes, of course, yes. It states that, and then, you know, the third part, you know, the closing part of that particular provision also says, you know, the activities that follow the discovery of the conflict of interest should be in line with the conflict of interest policy, you know, of the company, for obvious reasons. They're the ones who on behalf of the board and of course, you know, by default on behalf, you know, of the shareholders as well. They're the ones that watch over the cookie jar, so to say, you know, on a daily basis. You know, so if they can make, you know, financial gains or what has the semblance, you know, of gains by virtue of that privileged, you know, position that they hold, then it's imperative for them, you know, to declare it in the spirit of transparency. You know, for example, I mean, they will be in charge of strategic, you know, intelligence information just by virtue of the role that they play. You know, so it's important to then check them, you know, so that they are not unchecked. And so if there's anything that has the semblance, you know, of them taking advantage, you know, or making private gains by virtue of the kind of information, the kind of, you know, details about the company that they're exposed to, by virtue of their position, then it's important, it's imperative for them, you know, to declare.
So what's the implication of declaring this conflict of interest?
The implication of declaring, you know, the conflict of interest is that they would have aligned with one of the pillars of corporate governance, you know, which is transparency, and then of course accountability, you know, essentially, because you couldn't, I mean, for all you care, it may not, you know, be out of, you know, corrupt mindedness. It's just something that has semblance, you know, of them, you know, making any form of gains by virtue of their, you know, position. By the time they declare, that's why I added the third aspect, you know, of that particular provision, that in the event of them declaring, you know, every action that will follow should be in line with the conflict of interest. The code also mandates, you know, that every company should have, you know, a conflict of interest, you know, policies where, you know, certain parameters are set out. You know, I mean, take for example the issue of, you know, insider dealing or dealing in the company's, you know, shares. There are instances where after declaring, you know, to the board, of course, to the chairman, there are instances where sometimes, you know, the transactions still fly, but all you know, guards would have been checked to ensure that you're not taking undue, you know, financial advantage, you know, of the company. So that's the essence of it, to checkmate them, and then in the spirit of, you know, transparency.
Okay, still talking about the executive directors, why does the code recommend that the responsibilities and authorities of executive directors should be clearly set out in a contract of employment?
Okay, we come to this contract of employment. You know, again, like I said, the principle 5.6, you know, outlines that each ED should have a contract, you know, of employment, and then the same thing is repeated, you know, in principle 12.6, 12.4, you know, where it says that NEDs should have letters of appointment, EDs should have contract, you know, of employment. You know, in my opinion, number one, it sets out, you know, the basis to assess their performance. You know, because it is like the rule of engagement. It would have set out what is expected, you know, of them. So that would be the basis, you know, to appraise them or to evaluate them, you know, when the time comes. You know, so it will not be a question of, I don't know what I'm being, you know, evaluated about. Then secondly, you know, is that it serves as basis to checkmate, you know, so that they understand the limits of their powers. You know, they understand the limits, you know, the length and breadth, you know, of their power. And then the third, in my opinion, you know, is that it sets out the liabilities. You know, what you don't know, the law, I don't know, ignorance is not excused in the law, you know, like you said. So the responsibility sets out the fact that, you know, the underlisted responsibilities of judges will be held liable, you know, for it. And that's the reason why, as a matter of best practice, as a matter of good practice, you know, when these contracts of employment are issued, you know, the director signs off on it, and then he keeps a copy, and the company keeps a copy for reference, you know, purposes. Those are some of the reasons, in my, you know, opinion, while the code sets out that the contract of employment
in order to make clear their responsibilities to the company,
for which they will be held liable for.
Now, I want us to quickly talk about the stability of tenure.
Okay.
The executive directors in an organization, is their being in the organization tenure based? Is there a number of years they should spend, or they can be in the organization for as long as they wish?
Theirs is not like the independent non-executive directors, okay, you know, which for obvious, you know, for obvious reason, you know, for obvious reason, for them to maintain that high level of objectivity, it's tenure, you know, limits of, you know, 3 tenures of 3 years, you know, each. For the executive director, of course, for any director, be it executive or non-executive, of course, the shareholders, you know, must stamp, so to say, must you know, ratify. You know, however, even though the NCCG, you know, didn't particularly state that, but the practice is that, you know, the non-executive directors, because they are employees, you know, first of all, and then they are experts, you know, they are there in terms of, you know, technical, you know, expertise. However, their tenures, you know, the tenures, you know, are renewed at general meetings, you know, of members, of shareholders. I mean, I'll give you an example. The CEO is an ED, like I told you. If you look at the CBN, you know, Code of Corporate Governance, which will now be a guideline now, because the NCCG permits, you know, for sectorial, you know, guidelines. It mandates, you know, that the ED, MD, CEO, you know, should have, you know, a tenure of 5 years each, subject, you know, to a maximum of, you know, 10 years. So that's a bit, you know, of, you know, a tenure. But nothing says he can't leave after 5 years. But his second tenure as target will be subject, you know, to ratification, you know, at general, you know, at general meeting of shareholders. You know, so at the expiration of any tenure, if so stated in the contract of, you know, employment of the ED, the renewal will be done, you know, at general meeting of members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawale. We can't exhaust this important topic.
I agree with you.
Definitely, we cannot exhaust the role of executive directors in business, but we are constrained with time, and this is where we'll wrap it up today. We want to thank you very much for having time to come into the program. And this is where we wrap it up on Corporate Governance Platform for today's episode. We want to thank you very much, our audience, for giving us your time. I am Tunde Odeyemi. Bye for now.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
Will Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application of corporate governance?
These and many more questions will be answered on
Corporate Governance Platform, a program designed to inform and educate our numerous viewers on the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities.
Join the Corporate Governance Platform crew every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. on MiTV, your talent station, via DSTV 255 and UHF 43.
Corporate Governance Platform, your strategy for the adoption of corporate governance best practices by corporate entities. Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Corporate Governance Platform, a program from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, is now at your doorstep.
By the way, what is corporate governance and what are its key pillars?
Will there be any conflict of interest if a person combines the roles of a chairman and a chief executive officer in a corporate organization?
What can Nigeria do to gain international recognition in the context of the application?